another Aligner Insider podcast. Well, hello everybody in podcast land. This is Dean Steinman, President of Ortho Marketing, and we are back with another Aligner Insider podcast for you. And to my left today is the world famous super handsome Dr. Barry Glazer. How are you today, Barry?
I'm well, Dean. It's a beautiful day. Today is Wednesday, May the 12th, 2021. Uh, Spring has sprung here in New York.
It
How you
sure
doing,
has.
Dean?
About time spring sprung. For those of you out in other hot lands, enjoy, and hope everybody is enjoying the spring and have a very, very enjoyable, profitable, and nice summer and safe summer. So now the fact that things have changed over the last year and things are kind of getting back to normal, we want to talk about the new normal again and talk about something that's really been important in a lot of people's eyes, and that's staffing and getting staff on board. And we're really excited to have a special guest with us today. We have Amy Demas. Amy is a dental consultant, and Amy is an expert working with staff and working with orthodontists and dental professionals, and having them to transform your desk and front staff and make sure that the phones are answered correctly, make sure they answer the right way, and to get your business and to be the forefront. So before I say anything more, I'm going to introduce Amy Demas. Amy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be with you.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. So welcome to our humble podcast here. So with that said, please introduce yourself. Tell us, who is Amy Demas?
So, as you mentioned, I have been in the dental community for a while. I am married to an orthodontist, Dr. Don Demas, and that has proved to be part of my path and my roadway into this consultant space. Uh, and that has come about as I've created Communicate Excellence, as I want to help those front desk team members with their communication skills so that they are the most effective in giving not only your first impression, your last impression, but all the ones in between as well.
So tell us a little bit about Communicate Excellence. How long have you been around, and what is it you actually do?
So I have had my business for 2 years, but I have been in the dental community for 12 years when I first met my husband. I started out with him filling in the different roles in his administrative office, first at the front desk, then if somebody was out in the financial space, another person out, maybe another time insurance space, and finally in the treatment coordinator. Well, I thought I was going to sit in those spaces for the rest of my life. I fell into the treatment coordinator when somebody was out for a week, and I thought that's what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. But then 6 years ago, if some know my story, I came and was diagnosed with cancer, and it knocked me off my back. Could not get up and do anything. And it's when you have life experiences like that, you sit there and say, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I knew I had to get back to my roots. And my roots are teaching roots. While I have a mechanical engineering degree, I homeschooled my kids back in the day when it was homeschooling and not schooling at home for over a dozen years. And I love to empower others. And what I have found is, especially those at the front desk, they may be told, here's how you put the phone on hold. Here's how you take it off hold. Here's an intake sheet. Maybe go at it. And they're not really empowered. And that's what I want to do for them, is make sure that they are empowered to represent the offices in the best fashion possible.
Empowerment is such a powerful thing. It really is, especially from a mental standpoint. So walk us through that. How does your consulting work? What is it that a practice needs these days in order to empower the employees?
Well, you need the time to actually train, but so many times we think training as a one-time event. We listen to a seminar, we listen to a podcast, we listen to one thing, but that's only head knowledge. We need to take it down into habits. And that's where my unique talent and abilities make a difference. I work with coaching, so I will listen to recorded exams, recorded calls, and I am providing that feedback loop using those recordings as a mirror for those individuals, and that's what helps them understand the alignment and or the gap of their actual performance compared to a standard, and then we want to close that gap. So that's where my work is and what makes it unique compared to either mystery shopping or mystery calling or otherwise, where it can feel a lot more gotcha. I work in a trust environment.
Hmm. Interesting. That's might be a little tension here, but it almost sounds like exactly like an aligner. There's a gap, and you figure out a way to close the gap and make it tighter. That's what the aligners do, and you do aligning. So it's a in a different way, obviously. Um, Barry, obviously have staff, and you've had staff for a while. Um, you know,
Mhm.
you're blessed. You have a great team, and they understand how to answer the phone correctly. But what do you hear from colleagues, or just read about in addition to what practices are saying as far as staff and how hard it is to find the right people?
Yeah, it seems to be, and I'm not sure if it's pandemic related, but it seems to be harder than ever to find anybody, even just bodies. Amy, you're nodding, so I guess you
Mhm.
agree. But I mean, it's just been it's interesting because there's been a resurgence in dental employment, dental practices, orthodontic practices, certainly doing a lot better now than they were a year ago. Now, when in New York we were shut down. Yet, and you would think that there'd be a whole bunch of people that are eager to return to the workforce, but that has not been the case. I have been blessed, Dean, to have a staff, long-term staff that I can count on. But you know, Amy, I was just thinking that it's hard enough to find people, but
Mhm.
it's also I have found that maybe one of the biggest challenges in my own practice is change, and the pace of change has accelerated so much since I opened my doors in 1994. Where maybe what was the change back then? You changed the color of your pencils, or I mean, there wasn't. I mean, it was pretty much old school. But even then, to change pencils, and it was like a big uprising in the office. And but now things are changing on a weekly basis. So how do you help your doctors and their staff overcome the fear of change? Do you know what I mean?
I do. I do. All, we like to say we like advancement and change, but we tend to resist it at all costs. And it's human nature. So, one of the things that I wanted to mention was some of the things that I study, and I really like to get in there and study about habits and how they change and how they resist change and how we have to attack it with small changes. It's these small changes master that make it a much easier than simply turning to the left or the right or making a change just for the sake of change. And then when you can provide the proof as to why the change is needed, you also get greater cooperation. So it's a combination of demonstrating the need and then breaking it down into tiny little steps so that it's not one giant step while they are still trying to take care of patients at the same time.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. And I think the other thing that right when you were asking me these questions, Dean, is I think that very often the last person to know what's going on is the doctor.
right.
Have you found that too, Amy?
Yes, it can be. I didn't know that was not being done anymore, or when did we start doing that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah, it happens in my
you're
office sometimes.
focused.
Like, oh, doc, we haven't been doing this in years, and I say, really? When did that happen? But yeah, so I mean, that's always a big obstacle to
Um,
overcome.
So in the first few months of this year, that we're almost halfway over already. 20. What have been the two biggest issues you found that an orthodontist dentist faces so far this year? Two biggest ones, right in the first. Obviously, staff in general, but what are the two biggest issues from an employee standpoint?
From an employee standpoint, you've hit on the number one, and we keep going around it, is finding the right staff members. And then if it's been so hard to find them, when do we even have time to properly train them or empower them as opposed to just do it, just do it. And so I would say it is the staffing, finding the right team members and then finding the time by which to train them effectively.
Um,
So, how does your company, Communication Excellence, help dental professionals with these issues?
Hmm. So when I provide the training, I want us to get an overall picture of why that communication is so important because we need to have a way where there is synchronicity. We're getting the same message across, but yet we're still honoring the personality in the individual in the way they say it so that we don't sound like robots. So there is an interesting dance that we have to do is same message, synchronicity, while maintaining our personality involved so that we don't come across as inauthentic.
So, what do you do? Do you do a lot of role playing, or what are the some of the techniques that you use that you found successful?
So the biggest one that I start off with is an overall training, but where the rubber meets the road is that coaching. I use that one-on-one. I have Zoom coaching. And that means I'm doing a lot of homework before I ever get to that one-on-one event. I will be have listened to an hour's worth of recorded phone calls for each person for each session. And so I am looking for their trends and behaviors. I am looking for not the outliers, although we will use those for training purposes, but we're looking for the trends and we're celebrating all along the way. The other thing I do is making sure that we gain that momentum. So when I coach, I have a rapid fire succession of coaching sessions. They are every 2 to 3 weeks for 5 times. So we're taking a power quarter of the year and we are making sure that we get those changes and establish them because we need to do it small enough to get the cooperation, but enough to make an impact. And so we're striking that balance. So it's that coaching methodology that I use.
So let's talk about that. So, what has been the biggest challenge that you see that you overcome as far as practice faces?
One of the biggest ones that I see, if there is a resistance, it will be that team member who is about ready to ride off into the sunset. It's been good enough all this time. And so, why go through the effort in the last few months or year or otherwise? So, that's one of my resistance points. The other one, and we talk about that intake process, that first call that people make into an office. How do we make it more of a conversation? And if I have an office that is locked onto their computer with a death wish that we are going to be so no paper office, they hold on to it thinking they are as efficient as possible, even if I will play recordings where these long dead pauses because they are busy typing or clicking through. But from the caller's experience, it is not a good one. It's rarely a good one. So those tend to be my two most resistance points are those that are about near retirement because, what's it matter? Or those that are hanging on to their computer for dear life.
Mhm. Interesting, interesting. All right, so let's talk about that. You say training. So obviously, the trainers need to be trained. You know, how do you keep up with newest trends? So, what is it? What's your methodology? Methodology? Every trainer has their own unique way. And when you said before, the small change is more important than big change, and little steps are more important than big steps. How do you keep up to date with things? And what is? Do you have a certain um, method or follower? Discipline that you follow, or is it your own? Talk a little bit about your training program and what's behind it.
So I'm a voracious reader or assimilator of information. So I read anything I can get my hands on around habits. So BJ Fogg, he wrote Tiny Habits. There is The Power of Habits by Duhigg. There's the book called Mini Habits, all these different things. I also read a lot about the mind and how it works. So that's Crawford with Life from the Top of the Mind. All these different things about how the mind works. I'm also studying about adult learning. So while I homeschooled, I developed most of my own curriculum, and there are certain ways to get people to cooperate with that learning. And so I'm constantly finding how am I going to grab that adult learner and gain their attention? So I continue to learn and adapt and then listen and be curious as I'm listening to the recordings that I'm playing back to myself. Where are the nuances? And if I get a new insight, writing those down, and I put them into my online academy so that my learners can view it, read it, print it, whatever is their best modality of learning. I hit it from all angles.
That's interesting. For a long time in my office, my strategy, which I'm sure you've heard of before, was to sort of just try to ignore problems and hope that they went away. I mean, I can't imagine it's just me, but conflict is hard, and you're under the gun during patients are coming in, and you're dealing with everything else, and it's just was very easy for me in the past to just try to I'll deal with it tomorrow, or hope that it will go away, and obviously that's a mistake, but it gets me thinking about like all these preconceptions that us orthodontists have about staff, and I'm sure a lot of them are myths. So in your experience, what's the one common myth about dealing with employees that you'd like to debunk right here and now?
Oh, wow, that is always an interesting thing. Is that I think the biggest one is if you train it, they will do it. And that's
Mm,
not the case. The training is simply the head knowledge. You have to have the follow up on it, whichever way that is, whether you're using a checklist to make sure it's done, whether you're providing a feedback loop to make sure it's done. So the one and done is a myth about it. Training does not mean habits at the same time.
yeah, that's a great observation, and I think we make the same mistake sometimes. Like we'll say, "Look, I taught my patient how to brush their teeth, or I taught them how to put their rubber bands on," and I think we have this sense that we're giving orders, and that it's a very militaristic concept that we're giving orders, and we expect that people just follow them. But I find more than ever, it seems like at least Americans, the last thing they want to be is told what to do, and that it tends
Mhm.
to make them sort of move in the opposite direction. So I think that's a fascinating observation because right. Oh, I went over this with my staff already.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've heard that before. Like I don't understand why they're not doing it.
So,
Is so true, and then the other thing that we as team members forget about when we are empowering our patients is this curse of knowledge. The Heath brothers, in their various books, talk about it. The one I'm thinking of is their book Made to Stick by the Heath brothers. And the curse of knowledge is something that's so common to us. It's it's like if I told you to tap out a song for somebody else, you have that song ringing in your head as you're tapping it out. And you're wondering, why can't they guess it? And it's because you hear it clearly in your head, but it's not clear to the other person. And so many times it's clear to us and we're not empowering our patients. And then we wonder, what, what, why is there this conflict that we didn't avoid because we weren't over communicating what feels like to us over communicating
Hmm.
because it's such common knowledge to us that we forget to talk about it. We forget to
Yep.
say the implications.
Yeah, and I see that, you have the staff meeting, you have the agenda, you go through the list, and then, like I said, I think a lot of us, kind of go, okay, what's next? And I do agree that I think it's that accountability part, making people understand, what you're having clear expectations. But then I think the follow up is a lot of times where it fails. So, do you in your business? Is that something that you help us orthodontists do as far as like following up and holding staff accountable and making sure that these lessons become behaviors?
Absolutely. The phase 2 and 3 of my program do that. That phase 2 is all that implementation of the habits, as I was alluding to in that 3 months of time. It's those 5 rapid succession periods of time, and they're on the calendar, so we don't miss them. But that's great. I want us to make sure that we sustain those habits. And that's what happens in my third phase of the programs that I work with is we take a step back and it's like taking the training wheels off and saying, okay, how are you going to go when I'm not they're providing that feedback every 2 weeks. What's going to happen when you go through the crazy months of surge of activity in your particular office, or when somebody's on maternity leave, or whatever the stressor is, because stress impacts performance.
Right.
I come back in and check in with that Zoom meeting and recordings at month 6 and 9, because I want those enough time span to go by to say, will those habits sustain? What I find is most do, but maybe the one that was our Achilles heel is having that dip, and we put a gentle reminder in there so that it comes back up, and it's not the first step of a slippery slope that tails it off, and you go, well, why'd we do that? So I like it when we have those regular check-ins. It's like, I sure hope when you fly on a plane that they do the maintenance on the planes. Just because it was built well doesn't mean it stays well forever and ever and ever.
We already fixed the wing.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Can you see the tape?
Yeah, yeah, it's fixed. Then we can
Exactly.
do what's next.
Yeah.
So, Amy, so what, how do you quantify the results after training? Do you have any statistics that show, after a staff goes through training, either yours or what have you, generally they should obviously see a increase in business across the board. Is there any industry numbers or if your company wide case studies that you could share with us that will give people an example of how important a consultant is and what it does for the bottom line?
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. One of the things that is tricky about the work we're doing is measuring how well they execute saying this, doing that, and the other. These are leading indicators, which instead of being a lagging indicators can be harder to quantify, but we can still go down the way and see what happens to production, what happens to collections, and things of that nature. And case studies that I've done in my particular offices, I will have a treatment coordinator, maybe I've worked with, someone who is the salesperson saying, I used to have X number of patients and now I am completely booked. It has gone up 2 to 3 times,
Wow,
which means that front desk
something's
intake
working,
process has been more effective.
right?
They are now full. Yes, I've had offices that are already mature offices. So this is not that new office that growth is going to be innately occurring. Saying I was flat for 5 years and now I grew 20% the first year, and all I did was work with that front desk team member. I hadn't even worked with the treatment coordinator. They're simply getting more, and they're having to add office time to their satellite offices. So we're seeing the impact of it, but because it's a leading indicator is tougher to directly measure because it's so early within the process. But you do see changes, such as your no-show rate for your new patient goes down, which means then when it's time to offer the close of the sale, they are better prepared because we communicated what to expect when they come in. And we've created a better first impression along the way.
Got it. So let's put on your crystal ball glasses, and where do you see the orthodontic dental industry in the next 12, 24 months? And if you went back, 14 months, you wouldn't even think of the word pandemic or know it. But let's assume it's a quote unquote back to normal world. Where do you see things going from a training and staff perspective? Um, is it more digital? Is the human touch out of it? Is it even more human? Is it because they're the first touch and the first part of communication with a potential patient? Where do you see that going?
I think we have opened the door to a lot more virtual that we will never be able to return back away from. I still believe we have a large number of our patients who want to be seen physically first time, but we're going to have to be smarter. We're going to have to learn how to ask the right types of questions to help to send them down the path they want to go. Do you want to come in for a long full exam, or do you want to have a shorter virtual exam or a shorter exam where the doctor will review everything but may not actually spend all the time with you? And that means our front desk team members are going to be gatekeepers into those decision points along the process. No longer will the process be The phone rings, I take the information, I schedule them, I send out the letter that we used to do.
Right.
It's going to be, I take the call, I ask the right questions, I ask the curious questions to help give them the experience that they want to have, that they desire to have, so that you're meeting them at their point of need. And I think we're going to have to get wiser and smarter in that. And
Right.
it's not going to be a straight line.
Right.
Mhm.
That never is it? This so this is great. So, a couple of follow-up questions here. Let's talk a little bit back about the company. If somebody, and everybody listening, if you are having staff issues, it's real important to call in an expert and to see how they can help you. And Amy is one of the industry leaders for sure. So, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can reach me by my email, and that is Amy at communicateexcellence.com, or go to my website of the same name, www.communicateexcellence.com.
Great. And let's to continue our education. One next step. So obviously, you said a big reader, and it seems like a sponge as far as bringing in information. Do you have a particular website, newsletter, podcast that you listen to, other books besides the ones you mentioned that you would recommend to those that want to learn more about just taking control and how to work with team members and well, just in overall, self-help.
I love Brene Brown. She is an expert on the podcast, and any book you can find about that she has written is amazing. And the reason I love her approach is she's a scientist as well as a great speaker, and how to translate that into usable information there. So I would recommend that to anybody on the team and or doctors. Anything on there that'll keep you busy for a while.
Excellent, excellent. All right, and I have two last questions for you. All right, question number one:
Yes.
what makes you smile?
Well, one of the biggest things since we're talking about the workspace, is when I see that front desk person, or I'm pre-listening and I hear, oh my goodness, that habit flipped. They've gone from saying, oh my goodness, Amy, you're in my head, I hear myself after the fact, to it may have been a challenge one, and it finally flips and you're like, yes, I feel like I'm going to jump up and down on my desk with them. And then when I get together with them, I will hoopla all over the place. So that makes me smile. And then when they say, you know what, Amy, callers don't take advantage of me anymore when I try to schedule them. And it's making a difference in how I parent with my kids. Or I've heard some say, and I'm actually now dating, that this newfound confidence
Wow.
that they have, the thing that we enjoy seeing with our patients, I get to see with those people that I train with when they finally nail those habits, because it helps them not only at work, but it helps them at home and helps them in their personal life.
Great. And one final question, and this is the most important of all. Okay, Hershey bar or Reese's peanut butter cup?
It's going to have to be the Reese's peanut butter
There
cup,
you go.
especially if it's the Reese's Easter egg,
Oh, the
you
the
know?
cream filling in it, huh?
You're
I
batting a
think we're at a
thousand, Dean.
99% number of people have questioned it. I think I need a new one.
I'm waiting for that big sponsorship deal from the
The
Reese's
Reese's,
people
exactly.
any day now.
I got to get them back. Exactly. They should deliver a
Amy,
pizza to
you
us.
just to let you know, Dean and I agree with you 100%.
We
We
do.
are all in agreement on
We,
this.
we, we do.
There's just something about it, because you get the twofer.
Exactly. You
Exactly,
got
right? Who
chocolate in my
wouldn't want
peanut
that?
butter. You got peanut butter in my chocolate. That'd be great.
I just saw that commercial. I was sitting actually in the Charlotte airport, and there was a candy store. And as you would stand there, it would have all the old commercials, and that commercial about the guy skating and the girl walking with the peanut butter and the chocolate, and they hit, and
Hmm.
you got peanut butter on my chocolate. You got chocolate in my peanut butter. I just saw that just this
Really?
past
Oh,
weekend.
that's great.
Talk about good marketing,
Right?
how that we can
Exactly.
remember those
Yeah.
commercials like all those
Oh,
years later.
Oh,
yes.
for sure. Every
Oh, yes.
All right. So,
Oh,
Amy,
that's
Demas,
funny.
thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. This is very insightful. We look forward to having you come back again. Again, everybody out there, if you're interested in learning more about Amy, please reach out to her, email her. You can follow her also on social media. She's on LinkedIn. What other platforms do you want people to follow you?
Instagram, Facebook, for personal on my Facebook and for my business on my Facebook.
Terrific.
I have Communicate Excellence or Amy Demas.
Great, great. And she puts up some good stuff, so keep an eye on that as well. Well, Amy, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. And, this is very helpful, great for the community. Guys, please pick up listen to your staff. See, you look at your numbers. If you see them going the wrong way, it's smart to bring in an expert. Um,
And give
lot
them a
of
Reese's.
big difference, and also give them
That's
Reese's. Exactly. So with that said, everybody in podcast land, thanks so much for listening. Everybody be safe, be happy, and enjoy the spring. Bye bye.